and start the recording here. Alright, so like I was saying, this week we're starting a new project, and that new project is a throwing gauge. So throwing gauge is a selfish project for me because I want one, because I like to play with clay, and this is a useful tool for playing with clay. A throwing gauge is, let me kind of show you what we're doing here, just so you can kind of see what the goal for the next couple of classes is here. The idea is you set this on a potter's wheel, and then you have a point, so it kind of leans over the wheel, and you have a point that you try to throw your pot up to, so you can make a repeatable shape. So this kind of sets, this point sets the height, and it sets the kind of the width, the opening of our pot here. But for us, for our purposes in this class, it's an excuse for us to make a whole bunch of joints. So, you know, there's a joint here at the end. We've got revolute joints, which we made in the last class. However, we also have sliding joints in this. So this gauge you can slide up or down, so you can make it any height you need to. You can rotate it at the base, or you can you know, to lean in if you want to. Obviously you'll be able to rotate it here as well. However, I wasn't able to figure out how to add that joint in Fusion, so that'll be research for me for the next class. But as you can see, we've got a whole bunch of joints, and you can slide them around and move them back and forth one at a time. Unfortunately, you can't do multiple joints at once, but that's that you get the picture. This base I'm imagining 3D printing, and then these arms I'm imagining laser cutting these out of some plexiglass, so that'll be an easy process. And without further ado, let's go ahead and make this. I'm going to go ahead and start a brand new document here, a new design. And we are going to start by making some of the arms of our joint, of our throwing gauge here. So I'm going to grab my Create Sketch tool here from the Create menu. So I'll go ahead and create a new sketch. And I'm going to draw this sketch on the front plane, so I can either move my view cube around so I can see my front plane a little bit more easily, and highlight it so I spin that. Now I'm creating a sketch. On this sketch, we are going to make almost everything for our throwing gauge. So you'll forgive me if we may do a lot of pausing here, just so you can kind of see the sketches that I'm making, but I'm going to start by creating the first arm of our throwing gauge, and I'm going to do that by creating a couple of circles. So I'm going to create a circle right at the origin, and this circle is going to be 3/4 of an inch. So 0.75 inches. I am going to then create a line that goes from the center of that circle straight up. Now this line is going to represent the height of our throwing gauge here, so I was going with a length of 12 inches. That seems fine to me, but if you want to make your throwing gauge a different height, feel free to do so. But again, I'm going with 12 inches. Feel free to make your throwing gauge of any height. And at the top of that circle, at the top of that line, I'm going to draw a circle. And this circle is also going to be 3/4 of an inch. I'm just going to do some kind of cleanup here. So the 3/4 of an inch is going to represent the width of our throwing gauge here. And I'm going to need to make lines that represent kind of the outside edge. So this part that we're creating is, if I look at the side view here, you can kind of imagine we drew this circle down here at the bottom, we drew this circle up here at the top, And now we need to make the edges of our shape here. And I'm going to do that with the line tool. So I'm just going to go ahead and say create and then line. And I'm going to click and place a line at my top circle and move down and place that line connecting to my bottom circle. And I'm going to do that again here. So I'm just going to click and place a line. Now, when I placed my line down here at the bottom, I was able to kind of hover and get that tangent constraint to pop up, which is definitely what I want. At the top, I could have held down the Shift key and kind of forced it to be tangent right from the start, but we can also just go ahead after the fact and add a tangent constraint. Try to frame myself up a little bit better here. Add a tangent constraint to the circle on the line at the top. So I just went ahead and grabbed from my constraints menu, I grabbed this tangent constraint, and now I can make that circle and that line kind of forced to be tangent with each other there. This central line I really just used as a measurement tool. It's just used for construction purposes, you could say. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that into a construction line just by hitting the X key. And that'll save us some steps later when we actually go to extrude some of these shapes. You can see now that line isn't broken in two by that solid line. You can also, from the sketch palette, if you want to turn something into a construction line, you can just hit that construction button in the line type option there in the sketch palette, and that'll go ahead and change that to a construction line. Alright, now we need to make a couple of more circles. So down here at the bottom, we need to have a pivot point. And I'm imagining using quarter 20 hardware for all of this, just because quarter 20 is pretty common. It's easy to find lots of different hardware in quarter 20. So as I want a quarter 20 bolt to be able to fit really nicely through this and not have a whole lot of friction going on, I'm going to make this into a 0.26 inch circle down there. So it's just a little bit bigger than a quarter of an inch. That'll give some wiggle room for the bolt so there's not too much binding there. I'm going to do that same slightly larger than quarter inch circle at the top here. So we get a 0.26 inch circle at the top. And now the last circle we need to make here is going to represent kind of the end of our slot. So down here near the bottom, I'm going to add one more circle that's 0.26 inches. And now is probably a good time for me to take a little brief pause here while I organize my sketch a little bit. I can rotate it sideways, and that'll let you see it a little bit better. There are two more lines that we're going to add to this sketch, but just take a brief pause just in case I was drawing too fast. Was I drawing too fast? I tend to draw too fast. I could take a Frito break, a little Frito pause. Pause for the Frito cause. Support your local Frito-Lay company. I mean, they're distributed locally by the gas station that somebody bought this from. So, how are you guys doing at home? Did I go too quickly? Good? Cool. All right, excellent. All right, so now I'm going to draw the final two lines that make up this little arm sketch here. And those lines are going to be similar to the way I made these lines. I made these lines to connect these two circles here. I'm going to make my next lines to connect these two circles here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my line tool, and I'm going to click up here at the, come on, you can do it. Doesn't want to, there we go. So I click and place my line, and then I'm going to kind of hover so I get that tangent constraint that pops up there. And I'm going to do that one more time here. And you know, these are small features, so I'm going to zoom in and make sure that I'm snapping, because it's easy when you're dealing with small features to accidentally draw your line off to the side here slightly and not quite snap to the point where you want to, because you definitely want to make a solid connection to that line there in that circle. The same way I did the first time, I'm going to add those tangent constraints up at the top. This is much more important for this inside track, because this is literally the track or the slot that our 1/4-20 carriage bolt is going to slide up and down. So we really got to have this these two lines be parallel with each other, and one of the ways that we can do that is by making sure they're tangent to circles that are the same size. So because these circles are the same size, these lines will be parallel to each other and maintain a constant width the whole time. Okay, cool. So we're basically going to do those same steps. We're going to do those again in order to make the top section of our arm. And I guess I'm going to choose to do this all in the same drawing. But now I'm second guessing to see if I want to make it on different drawings. I think I am going to do this all in the same drawing. Sometimes it's nice to break up sketches into, or break up a drawing into multiple sketches for the sake of organization and your own sanity. But there's really not a whole lot to this. The only thing left is just this top arm, and we're going to make it similar to how we made that bottom arm. In fact, we've already got one of the circles drawn for us. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my line tool, and I'm going to use my line tool and draw from this center point of these top circles, and I'm going to draw it out. Now this is going to represent kind of the maximum reach that our throwing gauge can go to. So I'm going to make this again 12 inches. I don't really know. I probably should have walked over to a pottery wheel before I started drawing and done some measurements. But the beautiful thing about Fusion is we can always go back and change these measurements later. So even right now, for example, if I go up and say, hey, turns out I only need this to be 8 inches of height. It's real easy to just change that one measurement, and now we've got an 8-inch tall gauge instead of a 12-inch tall gauge. I'm pretty sure that I am going to need like 12 inches height, so I'm going to change that. Alright, so now we can make a couple more circles here, and the circles that we're going to make are at the end point of this long line. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and turn that into a construction line right now. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my circle tool one more time. I'm going to place it out here and make a 0.26 inch circle, and then a second circle of 0.75 inches. And then the very same way that we connected the circles for the bottom of our arm, we're going to connect the circles for the top arm here. So I'll grab my line tool, either from the Create menu. I can come in here and say Create and then Line. Or I've been in the habit of, there's a few tools that you use regularly, just getting to know those keyboard shortcuts. So L is the keyboard shortcut for the line tool. And this time you can see if here's my little keyboard shortcut trick. So if I hold down the Shift key before I click and place the beginning of my line here, you can see because I'm holding down the Shift key, this is going to maintain that tangent constraint to that circle. So if I know I want to have a tangent constraint at the beginning of my line, I can hold down the Shift key and then click, and I can actually let go. Oh no, I can't. I gotta hold down the Shift key. Can't zoom in while you're holding the Shift key though. So if I'm holding the Shift key again, I can make sure I get that tangent constraint to pop up here on this circle. And I can zoom in here and I can see these little icons here are my tangent constraint icons. And we can see that I've got tangent constraints and all of my intersections between my lines and my circles. And that's exactly what we want to do. You know, I'll mention, while we're talking about constraints here, the way that you know a line is fully constrained is because it turns black. Now I have some lines that are blue here, and that's because those lines are not what's considered fully constrained. And that's because this circle, this end of my slot here, doesn't really have a distance. My slot doesn't have a distance. So my total width here is 12 inches. But my slot is something less than that. And if I wanted to, I could specify a distance for that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. In fact, I think I can specify a distance here. If I go ahead and grab from my Create menu, I can choose this Sketch Dimension option here. And I can add, just like I can add a constraint after the fact, I can add a dimension after the fact. So if I click these two circles, oh, will it let me do that? It's not going to let me do that. Can I give a dimension to that line? That's interesting. Why? Maybe I'll give a dimension down here. Nope, I still have my dimension tool. So I'll click this circle and I'll click this circle. There we go. So now I can place a dimension down here, and you can see as soon as I place that dimension, both of those lines became black. Now I could just type a number like 1.5 inches here. And I guess that's probably what I'm going to do, because now, yeah, because whatever height I make this will just still be 1.5 inches. So if I change this to 6, it gets much shorter, but again, my 1.5 inch distance stays the same here, as opposed if I were to dimension between these two circles. Every time I change this length, I would have to change, you know, that other length as well. So I'm glad that I chose to do those bottom two. Alright, but again, I'm going to change that back to 12. And now we can add our last two lines here. And those lines are going to be connecting the small circles for our top arm. So I'm going to kind of place my dimensions so they're a little easier to read. And I'll go ahead and grab my line tool again. I'm going to hold down the Shift key before I place the start of my line. And now I'm snapping to that tangent constraint. Do that one more time here. Oh, that's interesting. That didn't work at all. So I have a line that didn't work, and in fact it looks like it's giving me some sort of weird coincident constraint. It thought I wanted to snap to the middle, so I'm just going to go ahead and save myself some trouble and just delete that line. Sometimes deleting is the way to go. And you know, sometimes if you've got to zoom out and then zoom in order to place a line, holding down that shift key doesn't work out so well. So it may just be easier in some cases if you got to zoom out and zoom in just to add those tangent constraints later. Over constrain, probably because I snapped to that intersection there. And here, there we go. All right. So now we just have a couple, or how are we doing? Am I going too quick?
I have no idea until I try extruding if the right stuff is connected to the right stuff.
Okay, cool. Tell you what, you know what? That's a good suggestion. Let's go ahead and extrude some stuff now, because we can always go back and add stuff to this sketch, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say Finish Sketch. I got a sketch in my Sketches folder. You guys know I like to keep up on naming stuff, so this sketch is going to be called My Arms. Not your arms, my arms. All right, and now we can extrude some things. So let's start by extruding the kind of this upright arm. So I'll go ahead and click on Create, and then Extrude, and I'm going to go ahead and click on all the bits here that I want, because you can imagine what we want here is a open slot down the length of our arm here, and then we want to have a open hole at the bottom where we can have a rotation point, and then a slot that goes all the way up. And I'm going to extrude this one negative number. So I'm going to extrude a negative 1/4 of an inch. You can do yours a positive, but the key is we're going to extrude both of our arms in opposite directions. So this first one is coming towards me 1/4 of an inch, and the next one is going to go away from me 1/4 of an inch. I'm seeing, I got to zoom in here because I got a little kibble down here to pick on. Alright, so that looks like all the bits from that first arm. I'm making it a new body, negative 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to say OK. Cool, so now I can extrude my top arm, and then that'll be the moment of truth. We're going to do it the same way, so I'll go ahead and click on Create, and then Extrude. And the top arm, I'm actually going to spin around to the back. So I'm on the front right now, but if I use my view cube and spin around to the back, it'll be easier for me to click on all these kibbles over here. I can kind of zoom in and make sure I get all the little bits, and I'll zoom out and do the same over here. Now something that's going to be key here is when we extrude this, again we want to make sure we go in the right direction. So my first extrusion happened out towards me. This one is happening away from me, so we can see that they're going in kind of opposite directions from each other. The first one went a negative 1/4 of an inch, and this one is going to go a positive 1/4 of an inch. So again, they're going in opposite directions because they're going to meet up with each other and kind of, rub next to each other like that. And we don't want to join these bodies together. We want these bodies to be each a new body. So I'm going to make sure I choose new body there. And then I'll say OK. And if I want, I can hide my sketch. I got a couple of bodies to name, so you can see this is kind of the goal that we're trying to get to here, where we got one body that comes forward, and this is going to be my vertical, and that's going to be my horizontal. Just anything is better than body 1, body 2. All right. Cool. So that's where we're at so far. How are we doing? Yes.
What are you guys making now?
We're making throwing gauges. So it's a selfish project for me because I want one.
No.
And also, we're gonna add joints to these throwing gauges, so we can get people. We learned about joints last week. We're gonna continue that knowledge this week. Cool. All right. So, are you all with me? Are you following along at home? Are you following along here? Got some questions? And let me peek over a shoulder here. How are you guys doing at home? Oh yeah, you're.
Oh, well, I extruded here, but then when I went to extrude this arm, it discombobulated the first arm that I extruded.
Yes, if you right click on that down there and say edit feature.
Yeah.
So look at a little bit more three-dimensional view of that. So it's cutting into that first shape.
Okay, so
You take
go
that arrow and make it a
negative. Okay.
And then
And, right, new body.
There we go. Now you're looking pretty good.
Okay.
Cool. You got two bodies in your body folder? How you doing?
Yeah, I know.
Cool.
Yes,
Nice.
I have a body 1 and a body 3.
All right. Now you can name those. You can leave them named Body 1 and Body 3. I won't judge you. I promise. But I'm too OCD for that. I get confused easily, so I gotta name my stuff. Otherwise, you can call it Bob, Harry, Tom, Brenda. Yeah, all names are acceptable. All right. So now that we've got our arms drawn, let's go ahead and draw the base for our little creation here. And the base, I'm actually going to draw on the same sketch because I can, and you can't stop me. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and edit that sketch. Over in our sketches folder, I've got my sketch that I appropriately labeled arms or named arms, and I can right-click on that sketch, and I can say Edit Sketch. Now, the other way that I could do this is down here in the timeline. So this very first icon down here in my timeline, if I hover over it, it tells me that that's my arms sketch. And it does that because I named my sketch arms. Otherwise, this would be called like Sketch 1 or something like that. It's another reason to name things. So I can right-click on that down in the timeline and also say Edit Sketch. And now I go back in time. So I don't have any, all my extrusions are grayed out down here in my timeline at the bottom, because I'm back in time before I made those extrusions. And we can go down here to the bottom, or what will be the bottom of our shape, and draw a couple of more circles. So if I go ahead and grab my circle tool, either from the Create menu, I'll go ahead and choose Center Diameter Circle, or if we're getting used to using keyboard shortcuts like I am, we can hit the C key on the keyboard. C for Center Circle, and I'm going to place that center diameter circle concentric with those bottom two circles, and I'm going to go ahead and make this like 2 inches, seems good. A nice beefy little circle here, a little 2-inch radius, 2-inch diameter, excuse me. I'll scoot that measurement off to the side where I can see it a little bit better. And I'm going to place one more drawing here. So if I click on Create and then Rectangle, I'm going to make a 2-point rectangle here. And I'm going to place that 2-point rectangle, the start of that 2-point rectangle, just down below my 3/4 inch circle somewhere. So I can actually add a dimension to this later. So right now I'm going to just kind of place it down below here. I'm going to give it some dimension. How about? That would be nice. In fact, I can purposefully place it in the wrong spot. So I'm going to place my rectangle definitely in the wrong spot here. I'm going to give it a height of 1 inch, and I'm going to give it a width of 2 inches as well. That'll be fine. Now I'd like this rectangle, I'd like the point of this rectangle to be directly underneath the center of this circle here. And I didn't draw it in the right place, but I can use some constraints to make it pop into place. The constraint specifically that I'm going to use here is the horizontal vertical constraint. So this one comes in really handy. This constrains a single line or 2 points to lie on either the vertical or horizontal axis. So really I can make anything appear directly underneath or directly to the right of something else. So as you remember, the thing that we want to do the moving, so we want this rectangle to move, so we're going to click on that part of that rectangle first, and then the thing that we want to move it to is alignment with this circle here. And you can see that that goes ahead and pops right into place here. It's interesting to me that we've got some blue lines and some black lines. It tells me it's not fully constrained, but I'm going to add one more constraint here, and that's going to be a dimension constraint. So if I go up to my Create menu and I grab my Sketch Dimension option here, just like I added a dimension after the fact for the distance between these two circles, I'm going to add that dimension after the fact for the distance between the center of that circle and this point here. And I can go ahead and place that dimension off to the side, and I'm just going to make it a 1/2 inch. I think that's fine. There's a little bit of gap there. Now my lines all turn black. So it's interesting that these top and bottom lines needed a vertical constraint in order to become fully constrained. Alright, so that is all we're going to add for now to this sketch here. And now if we say Finish Sketch, something that's kind of nice is we didn't have to change anything about our first extrusion. Even though these circles or these lines overlap with our extruded parts, it doesn't mess up and choose the wrong things to extrude when it goes ahead in the future. So now we can go ahead and we can extrude out one of our things here. Well, let's go ahead and extrude out our circle. I got to go around to the back side of this, and I'm going to go ahead and extrude out my circle, and I'm going to extrude everything except for this little 1/4 inch recess here. I'm going to kind of look at it from the side here so you can see my sketch exists on the front side of this. So I'm going to pull my arrow out kind of away from my existing arm here, and I'm going to enter a dimension. Let's make this 1/2 inch, nice and beefy. Now the default here is join, but I actually don't want to join. I want to make this a new body, because this is a whole new ball game here that we're making down here, which is our base. So a new body, and I'm going to say OK. And now the next thing we're going to want to do to finish the creation of our base is that rectangle that we drew down here. I'm going to revolve this. So if I go ahead and click on from my Create menu, come down to this Revolve option, I'm going to choose the parts of my rectangle here, and then as an axis that I'm going to revolve these around, I'm going to revolve them around this inside of my rectangle here. Now you can see it's defaulting to a cut operation, but I actually want to make this, I'm going to make this a new body as well. Now, maybe I'll do this wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay, but you should not. So if I do this the wrong way, and by the wrong way I mean the way that you get to learn more stuff. Oh, look, it didn't. So sometimes when you choose to join, it kind of joins everything. So this body is touching this body, and this body is touching this body, and this body is physically touching that upper body. Sometimes when you say join, it kind of just joins everything together, and a way to avoid that from happening, from joining things you don't want to be joined when you're choosing this join operation, is just to turn them off in your bodies folder. So in my bodies folder, I definitely don't want to join it to this vertical arm. So I can just hover over my bodies folder, turn the little eyeball off, and now I won't accidentally join these things to that vertical arm there when I choose join. And I'm just going to say okay. So now we got one more body to name. This is our base, because you know it is all about the base. Alright, and now we're going to make the one last shape that we're going to need here, and that's our little flippy pointy bit at the end here. That is the technical term for it, the flippy pointy bit. In order to do that, we're going to go ahead and edit our sketch one more time. Actually, maybe I'll pause. How are we doing at home? Did we get a base? Thumbs up? Cool? Kinda? Tom's like kinda? Ish? Oh, I can get those numbers up for you one more time here if you want. So I made my circle was a 2-inch diameter circle, and then my rectangle here was a 1-inch by 2-inch. These are kind of arbitrary. I guess you want the base to be heavy enough, right, that it's not going to fall over real easily. So you want the base to be somewhat substantial. I guess depending on what you're going to make that base out of, it could be smaller if it's a nice, piece of aluminum that you're going to machine this out of somehow. I was just planning on 3D printing mine because that's easy. So I want to have a nice big base, and I suppose you could add weight in other ways, or like maybe attach it with magnets to the wheel. That could be a thing too. But anyway, so a 2-inch circle, and then a 1 by 2-inch rectangle there. Alright, so now we're going to make the last part of this physical drawing that we're going to need to do, and that's our point at the end here. So I'm going to turn my arms sketch back on here, and I can either right click on that and say edit sketch, or down here in my timeline I could right click on the sketch in the timeline and say edit sketch. And now I'm going to zoom right up in here to the top, and I'm going to make another line here. This line is going to come straight out from the top circle. This is just a kind of a construction line as well, because I'm going to make an arrow, I guess you could say. I'm going to make this... Oh, hey, look at that. I got a... My bad. Thank you, Nick. Thank you for keeping me honest. Alright, so I zoomed in here to my sketch. So I right-clicked and I said edit sketch. So I'm going to go back again. I'm going to right-click. I'm going to say edit sketch down here in my timeline. And the part that we're making is a little flippy bit down at the end. There's like a little arrow at the end of this thing. That's kind of the point of our gauge, the exact point that you're throwing to. And so I made a line that came straight out from that end circle. I'm going to turn that into a construction line just because I just wanted this to specify a distance here. And now I can click and place 2 more lines that will connect that end point and be tangent to our circle. So we got a little pointy arrow kibble down here at the end. And then I'm going to say finish sketch. Now this last thing here is just go ahead and extrude in this little pointy bit. It's going to be the circle and the pointy bit, and I'm going to make sure it just comes out towards me, just so, and this can be real narrow. This only needs to be like point. I'm going to make it 1/8 of an inch. And I'm making sure that this comes out towards me and doesn't kind of go into my arm. Sometimes in Fusion it's difficult to tell what direction you're kind of facing here, so you can kind of get really easily, your perspective gets kind of skewed, so you have to do some shifting around and go, which way am I pulling or pushing this thing? Do I need a negative number? Do I need a positive number here? But -1/8 of an inch, and we're making again a new body. And then I'm going to say OK. So I'll name this, that's my point. Alright, so the real purpose of this class is to make joints, but I'm not going to make joints with 10 minutes left in class, because some people get upset with me when I do things real fast at the end of class, and for good reason. So what I want to do instead with the last 10 minutes is just to kind of show you to grab some hardware for our project here. So next week we'll actually make the joints where everything moves around and slides. But in the last couple of minutes here, I want to show you that you can grab hardware. You can insert nuts and bolts and all sorts of things straight from McMaster-Carr. So first of all, how are you guys doing? Are you with me? Are we ready to insert some McMaster-Carr components? We're ready at home? Are we ready here in person? Getting there? Getting there? Not quite? Can I come peek over your shoulder, see what you got?
Sure.
Yeah. Sounding pretty good to me.
You got ahead of me and I'm
you're
scrambling
good,
trying
you're
to
good. No worries.
keep up.
Yeah, no
And then I
worries.
did some of the classical errors.
You missed the
Everything was
Sure.
a construction line, so I had to go back and fix it.
We had Mike had a construction line party because I was going too fast, and made a whole bunch of construction lines. I do that sometimes too. Like you just start drawing and going to town, and then suddenly you realize like, oh, I got a lot of dashed lines going on. That's fun. I can't extrude dashed lines. So we just extruded out that shape there that we just made there, Mike, and yeah, no worries, no worries. Frito break. Like I said, I don't want to make us do joints in the last 10 minutes. I think next class will be, we're going to make a lot of joints. There's a lot of joints in this. So there's sliding joints, there's revolute joints. We'll have to make some rigid joints here too, I think. You know, the other thing that we might do next class is, in addition to doing joints, maybe it's too much to do joints and talk about appearance and materials and things like that. Or like maybe we'll talk about laser cut, how to export something for a laser. Would that be interesting to you guys? I use Fusion to, yeah? Okay, cool. So I'll next class, in addition to joints, we'll talk about kind of my method for making DXF files that I can cut stuff out on a laser. In fact, I stopped on the way here. Just digging in my backpack back here. And I laser cut a couple of things, just kind of, oh, I gotta show my,
Okay, caught up, sir.
just laser cut a few things on my way here. Just stopped at the other space, quick open Fusion, shot some laser beams. I'm like in and out in 15 minutes. I love it when that happens. All right, cool. So now the last thing we want to do here in these last couple minutes is just to show you that we can insert some hardware. And in fact, we will indeed, I believe, need hardware in order to make joints, because we're going to use it as a thing that we make a joint around. So if I click on Insert here from my Insert menu, and I come down to this McMaster Car component option here, it opens up our McMaster Car window. For those of you who have seen me do this before, you know, like I'm a big fan of McMaster Car. I order from them at work all the time. So this looks like their website. If we just click on screws and bolts here, you can also search. So I could just search up here at the top for whatever you're looking for. The thing that I want is a quarter 20 carriage bolt. So I'm going to click on these carriage bolts here, because the square end of this carriage bolt will fit really nicely in that slot and give us a nice sliding path. I'm going to go ahead, this doesn't need to be anything special. Medium grade 5 I'm sure would be fine, but you know what, let's go crazy. Let's put that 18. It's going to be wet around the pottery area. Let's go ahead and grab that 18/8 stainless. And then over on the side here, I can scroll and find a size bolt. And I guess this is more important than figuring out a material, because we just need this for our drawing. So if I grab this quarter 20 size here, and now we get all these options. So I think we need at least 3/4 of an inch. So if I hover over this 3/4 fully threaded option here, I can click on the little product number, and then anytime where you get down here where you can see a product detail, then you can download a step file. So if it's the first time you're opening this, you may have to choose, it may have defaulted to like 3D SolidWorks or something like that. And we actually want, for Fusion, we want a 3D step file. Once I've got that quarter 20 carriage bolt that's 3/4 inches long selected, I can just say download. So it's going to go ahead and place that right down here at the bottom, and I can use this widget.
Okay, how do you get the little window larger? My little pop-up window doesn't have a download button.
You may have to like hover over the corner of the window there. There
Oh,
we go.
okay.
There we go.
All right, thank you, sir. Get
Yeah.
download.
Yeah, and once you download, and it's a step file that you've downloaded,
Yep.
then you can put it into place just with these little move widgets here. So it kind of automatically starts off with this kind of move scenario going on here. And now I can place one right at the apex of my rotation there. You spin around to the other side and really get it in the right spot. And actually the carriage bolt is only going to be able to go up so far because it's a square end, huh? So the carriage bolt will, but it'll be fine. Alright, so place my bolt, and then I can say OK. And I can do the same thing with a wing nut. So I'll go ahead and insert that as well. So I'll go back, grab another McMaster car component. This time I can search for wing nut. And 18/8 stainless is what we were going for. And I'm going to pick the correct size of 1/4-20. There I've got my 3D step file. And I can go ahead and say download. And then we'll go ahead and insert that as well into Fusion here. You know, it's kind of nice. We did drawings. We did a little bit of drawings the other day. Maybe something else we can talk about next time is included with a drawing, you can have tables. And tables can have part information in it. So I believe that all these parts that we're inserting from McMaster Car, down here you can see their components over here in the browser. I believe you can output a table with basically a parts list, and it'll just tell you, you know, what parts you need to order from McMaster Car when you're getting ready to make this thing. So you don't have to go back to your drawing. You can just have that printed out and ready to go. Parts list. Nice. All right, cool. So that's going to wrap it up for class this time around. We really need to have these two things here in order to make our joints. At least I think we need to have them here. We don't really need one down there, but you know, feel free to go ahead and practice going to McMaster Car and finding a bolt that'll fit right inside of here. Get another carriage bolt, I guess. I guess if you're going to do a carriage bolt, this needs to be a square slot in the back, but I'll let you cross that bridge when you get to it. And until next time, when we do joints, this is where we're at with this project. Any questions before we wrap it up here, guys? You guys have any like burning Fusion questions at home, or any concerns about the project so far? How are you doing? Cool. Thumbs up.
I like it that they used McMaster Car and started bringing parts in. It saves so much time.
Yeah, it's super handy, man. And you know, the McMaster Car parts are pretty cheap. Like, it's not like they're charging an arm and a leg for these things, right? It's amazing that they give you that kind of functionality for. Yeah, I'm shocked. I use it all the time. I think we order more parts for McMaster Car at work because I just stick them in my drawing all the time. Because it's real easy to do. So.
Yeah, I think that's why they do it. That's going to increase their sales to make it easier for you to use their parts.
Of course, you know, I work for a nonprofit, so we're always asking them for a discount. So, you know, I mean, yeah, you take the good with the bad when you give them the free stuff. All right, cool. So we'll see you guys next week for part 2 of Throwing Gauge.